Hey kids, or Malcolm, actually at this point, you're the only one we have, and we have another on the way, but we don't know what we're going to name you, or even if you've all made it this far. Right? But I'm making this video for you because I don't have time, unfortunately, to write, or maybe just the organization, to write what I need to. But every parent has the worry that they're not going to make it through their kids' upbringing, and that's something I worry about with you. And you want to impart as many lessons as you can before you move on yourself. And I think that it would be a tragedy for me to die and not be able to share some things with you. Or even if I do, this is an interesting record nonetheless, hopefully not too embarrassing for you. So it's, like I said, it's January 30th, 2017, or maybe I didn't say that. I'm 33 years old. Malcolm, so far you're our only son. You are, 21 months old? You're almost 2, you'll be 2 in April. And you are the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life, and also the biggest hassle. You are a saboteur. You destroy everything. And you are a bully. You don't let me do anything. If I sit down to try to practice guitar, you interfere. If I try to read, you interfere. But you are a blast. I'm glad I have you. And I'm going to miss that little guy when you grow up, because he is adorable. But being 33, I have a few life lessons. And so I've just broken down 3 of them. This isn't going to be the ultimate. This is going to make everything in your life better kind of advice. But just like so many things that you read now, they're bullet points, or they're a list of things. That's what I want to provide you, to at least give you some kind of framework to move forward in the world. It's the best framework I could think of, at least in the few minutes that I have. So one is, you need to follow something like the Dave Ramsey plan. And obviously this is something for you, maybe you're a teenager by now, or maybe hopefully a very smart young person. So finances are going to start to become something you think about. I first thought about finances when I was in 6th grade, I think, with Mrs. Aller, and she taught us about interest. And so immediately I told my mom, hey, I want to take all this money out of my piggy bank and I want to put it into a CD. Now, that's a certificate of deposit account. Those actually are a very terrible way, but it's all I knew. But if I had those kinds of instincts at that young of an age, I hope you do too. Hopefully that's inherited. Both your mom and I seem to have been born very uptight people, so I apologize for making you that way. But it might just be inherited to be super cautious. So in any case, the Dave Ramsey plan is something that has changed your mom and I's lives. Not so much because we didn't do things similar to it before. We did, but we have focused goals now. And the idea behind the Dave Ramsey plan is different than most financial advice you're ever going to get in your life. Most financial advice is going to go something like this. Here's a list of 15 things you need to do, and you need to do them all at once, and make sure you stay in debt for your entire life. That is completely unnecessary. It is self-destructive, and you will never feel like you're a free man. Ever. You will never feel freedom, because you will constantly and forever be locked into debt. When I went through tech school, when I joined the Air Force, I went to classes, and there were teachers there. They were civilians. They were retired master sergeants and stuff like that. And so they'd spent at least 20 years in the Air Force, made a decent rank, and the Air Force, the military actually pays really well, even for enlisted. If you count people's age, they get paid astonishingly well and have a great number of benefits. But They had gone through this, and been out of the service for 10 years. So they're working for 30 years, and they still had like a house payment. Because I remember asking one of our instructors, like, why are you here? He said, well, I got to pay for the mortgage. You're like 60, you're 50 years old. Why do you still have a mortgage? You do not need to be that way. You should not be getting in debt really at all if you can avoid it. I and your mother took out student loans, but neither one of us have. I don't think she's ever had a car payment, but I certainly haven't. The only other debt I had was a little bit of a credit card, and even before I knew Dave Ramsey, I just understood how bad of an idea it was. That this was pointless for me to pursue. And luckily, I didn't know anything about trying to maintain credit scores and all of that. I just got rid of it myself, and then started hitting my debt as hard as I could. But in April, when you're 2 years old, Malcolm, we're going to own this house. It'll be ours. That is unheard of for the most part. And houses are kind of historically expensive. This is not, we could have gotten a house for half the price that we got this house for. And a lot of people would go for that, but it would still take them 30 years to pay it off because they have 2 new cars and all of that. They have 2 new cars, and they have a Harley Davidson, and they have snowmobiles and everything else. They have the newest computer. They have the best games. You have to put yourself beyond that, because ultimately, whenever you start to really get into finance, you're going to find out that it's a philosophical pursuit about improving yourself. And I don't mean in a kind of wishy-washy way, but really finding out and constantly assessing what you truly value, because money and finances are kind of the science of value. And when you're doing that, you suddenly realize how much people are pulled in by the classical sins and the classical wrongs. They really are being screwing themselves over with gluttony and vanity. Those are probably the 2 big ones. Most people, and you will be this way. You're this way now because you're not yet 2 years old, Malcolm. But you are. Well, you're not vain, but you are a glutton, and that's just the way we're born. We want as much as we can, and in order to become civilized and become the kind of adults that we all want to be, you have to take that part out of your mind, and you have to constantly reassess what you need, what is a luxury, what is necessary, and the Dave Ramsey plan is part of that. So I don't really need to tell you what the Dave Ramsey plan is, because it's 7 steps. And my feeling is by the time that you're an adult, those steps will have changed. Dave Ramsey doesn't think they're going to change, but they're probably going to change because the United States is in such a precarious financial situation. Well, all countries in the world are. So once we see the debt collapse, which will probably happen before you're older, but it might not. It could continue on for a long time. Debt could just build. Maybe it is indefinite. After that happens, it's going to be a different world to live in. But if you have an edge, if you have time ahead of time before everything sort of falls apart, you need to be on the Dave Ramsey plan, because you need to actually own things. You need to have a house. At some point, although there are differences because of employment contracts and stuff like that, this notion that when you're like 65 or something, that you just get to automatically retire, I do think that will fall apart, but it shouldn't apply to you. Like, why should you have to work given the technological advancements that we have? And this is something that makes a lot of people socialists. Given the technological advances we have, why do we have to work until we're 65? Well, you don't. You don't. Malcolm, you don't have to work for the rest of your life. It's not that hard. We don't have to work that hard. Except you do have to work hard, but that's a different thing. But we don't have to work until we're 65 and then have this cookie cutter retirement package. You are more than capable of securing all the resources you need to become independent in a very short period of time, without a lot of education too. So do the Dave Ramsey plan or something close to it. The only thing I would advise you is to have a little bit of silver or gold. A little bit. I don't mean a lot. Like for emergency purposes. If you need to travel, It's portable property, so don't worry about whether or not it's money and whether or not people use it to actually trade items and whether or not a different currency will come in. It's property. That's all it is. So forget that it's money. You probably, if you have silver and something happens, you will probably just trade it for a different currency. Say if our currency isn't good anymore, if American dollars aren't good anymore, you will probably just trade it for the new yen or whatever that will replace it. But you'll retain value and you'll be able to transport it, and it's not traceable. So that's why you should have a little bit. At the bare minimum, have like $1,000 of it stored away with some in your safe with your bullets or whatever. So let's see what's next. Study everything. So studying is super important. Don't get wrapped up like a lot of people are in comic books and video games. One of the most frustrating things about being an adult and wanting to become more of an adult, wanting to become self-actualized, wanting to have a life of your own, is that there are very few people that are actually interested in that project in this day and age. That might change by the time you're older. But for the most part in America now, there's no such thing as a community. You're going to have to make an effort to know your neighbors. You're going to have to make an effort. You might want to join a church or some kind of club or something. But you're going to be isolated. And why did I think that was going to relate to studying? But that's a huge problem. It's related to the adulthood part of it. So if you stop studying and just go for all the fun stuff, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have fiction and some fun in your life or games, it's going to stunt your growth in a huge way. Because ultimately, any moment you spend not improving yourself, you're not improving for the most part. So I'm not saying it's impermissible to know everything there is to know about Spider-Man. But when that's all you think about and all you talk about, you're not going to be dealing with finances. You're not going to be dealing with philosophy. And you're not going to be dealing with how governments work and how money works, and just very, very important things. And that ignorance that you're going to gain by focusing on trivialities is going to actually make you more arrogant in the wrong way. It's okay to be cocky sometimes. I actually want you to be a little bit cocky, kids. But it's okay to be a little bit cocky, but it's another thing to think you know things when you do not know them, which is a huge problem right now. And that's basically where socialism and communism come from. It's people believing that if only they were king, they could solve all problems by being King Solomon, who, by the way, was not a good king. But that's another speech. So study everything. And again, fiction isn't off limits, but I just don't want you to become another comic book nerd. I want you to be like what the Christians say. I want you to put away, I think it was Paul who said he put away, when he ceased being a child, he put away childish things. Put away childish things. Star Wars is not important. It's not. It's not even very good. It's not that important. You know what's important? The fall of Rome. Greece. The British Empire. Islam. Communism. Capitalism. The Constitution. Those are things that are important, and you shouldn't really be goofing off as an adult until you have some understanding of those things. Seek out books. Hopefully you have mine, and those are a good indication. Seek out your own. Prove your dad wrong on a bunch of stuff, even though I'll hate it. Study, read. I think the average, millionaires on average, and I've heard a couple different statistics, and they're probably both more or less made up. But there's one for billionaires, one for millionaires. Millionaires read like a self-help book or a non-fiction book a month, at least one. So reading about 12 books a year that actually educate them. That doesn't mean you don't necessarily have to be taking notes in the margins. A lot of stuff you don't have to know the details about. You just got to get the gist. So that doesn't mean highly intense study, but just read. Just read. Another thing is with billionaires is that I've read that they read on average 2 self-help books a week. That seems